Hello, this is Pete Lund. I'm the lead proposer for this cost action. I've just put together a short PowerPoint presentation about the action to try to say a few things about what the action is going to be about, and in particular to say something about the roles that I hope some of you will be applying for fairly shortly. I'm aware that many of you have been involved with cost actions before, and if that's the case, you can skip over the first few slides and get onto the part where I talk about this specific action. The first 3 slides, not including this one, are going to be just a little bit about what COST is and how it actually works. So as many of you will already know, COST doesn't fund research as such. It funds networking activities which are designed to bring researchers together across different disciplinary boundaries and from different countries in order to get new research areas and to build links between subdisciplines. And it does this via a variety of networking tools which are listed on this slide. So from the top, going around clockwise, we have management committee and core group meetings, working group meetings, workshops and conferences, dissemination activities, training schools, and short-term scientific missions, and I think the newly introduced ITC conference grants. I'm just going to say something very, very briefly about each of these. You can read a lot more about them in the COST on the COST website. So management committee meetings obviously are meetings when the management committee gets together to decide the next steps to be taken in the action. These have to take place at least once a year. There can be 2 a year if necessary. The core group is a subgroup of the management committee that consists of the people that hold some key roles in the management committee, which I'll be talking about in just a moment. Working groups I'll be saying something about in just a moment, but these are the groups that actually organise and do most of the work that's involved in the cost action, and obviously these working groups can meet individually at any time. It's generally encouraged that meetings are merged. So for example, if there's a management committee meeting set up, it makes sense for one or more of the working groups to meet around about the same sort of time. Workshops and conferences I think are self-explanatory. We all know what those are. The aim is that they develop and showcase the things that the action is doing, and dissemination meetings give us a chance to run meetings alongside larger conferences where there may be a community of academics or industrialists or medics that we want to reach out to and discuss or explain what the action is all about. So those can also be supported via COST. Then we have the short-term scientific missions. These are basically exchange visits. Typically it might be a PhD student going to visit another lab in a different country to learn some new methods or to get access to some particular equipment or methods that they can't normally use. ITC conference grants are grants that can be used to send PhD students or early career investigators who are based in one of the inclusiveness target countries, and they can be sent to a conference to make a presentation which is relevant to the cost action, and the cost action would have to be acknowledged in order for them to be able to do that. And then training schools, again, that's pretty self-explanatory. These are schools that can be run for small groups of people to provide fairly intensive training on new methods or aspects of the subject that we want to develop or bring forward in some way. So that's what COST is all about. To say a little bit more about the action that we're going to be working on over the next 4 years, I've just taken a couple of figures out of the Memorandum of Understanding that you've also all got. And I just want to use these to explain a little bit about how we set the action up and why I think it's potentially going to be a really interesting piece of work for us all to do together. So this really is an overview of the action as a whole, and the idea here is that there are a lot of people working on different aspects of microbiological responses to low pH or the effects of acid on microorganisms, whether these are bacteria or fungi, who are working in quite distinct disciplines. They may be working in a clinical setting, they may be working in a food microbiology setting, they may be working in an industrial setting. We may be at institutes, government institutes, industry, universities. So there's a lot of shared interest, and there's a lot of shared interest in what you might call the fundamental underlying knowledge that's important for all these disciplines. But there's a tendency, I think, for these disciplines not to mix very much. They tend to go to their own conferences in their own areas. And it's my contention, and I think the belief of those of us that wrote the original proposal, that there's a great deal to be gained by mixing these disciplines up, by getting people who have a shared interest but maybe work in a somewhat different discipline to meet and talk to each other, share ideas, learn about each other's interests and approaches, look at the kinds of techniques that people use, and so on. And this is the aim of the action, is to bring these diverse groups together as much as we can and build relationships between them. So this is done via a variety of working groups. There are 6 working groups on this action. They're all listed here. The titles, I think, are pretty explanatory. The first one is to do with looking at what we already know, and perhaps more importantly, what we don't know. The second one is to do with looking at all the methodologies that people employ across the range of different disciplines that we study in. Third, fourth and fifth are specifically to do with clinical applications, biotechnological applications, and applications in food and drink industries. But I don't want people to see these as isolated. They should be overlapping. The whole aim of the action is to bring these groups together. And then the 6th working group is for communication and dissemination. And this is very important, both within the working groups and the people involved in the action, but also to the outside world, to the lay public and to other professional bodies who may be influenced by or interested in the kind of things that we are planning on doing. So the objectives of each individual working group are all listed in the Memorandum of Understanding, and I haven't reproduced them here because I've also attached the MOU to the email. Each working group has got a set of objectives, a set of planned tasks and activities, a set of deliverables and a set of milestones. And it's important to point out that now the MOU is signed, this is essentially the set of things against which the progress of the network will be monitored. So COST will look at the extent to which we're successful in delivering the objectives of each of these working groups over time, and the continuing availability of funding from COST depends on our success at meeting these targets that we've set ourselves. Now, these were set really by the subgroup that wrote the initial proposal, and they can be modified, but they can't be extensively changed. So we can certainly talk about them, look at them in more detail, maybe change the exact time at which they're going to be delivered, but we can't, at this stage in the COST action, make wholesale changes in them. So I'd really appreciate it if you would take the time to look at the Memorandum of Understanding. It is quite long, but please focus in particular on the working group descriptions and decide on the basis of what you read there which working groups you think you'd like to participate in, and if you're interested in leading any of these working groups, which of course I hope you will be, to decide which ones you might be interested in leading. So that's going to take a little bit of time, but please do take the time to do it carefully, and we'll then be in a good position to discuss our plans at the Management Committee meeting on the 17th of April. What I've shown in this diagram is how the action will be set up in such a way as to integrate the activities between the different working groups. And this linking of activities is going to be really very important. So what I've shown is that all the groups are connected to each other. The first 2 groups are to do with knowledge and methodologies. The second 3 groups, working group 3, 4 and 5 are to do more with content. And then working group 6 in part is responsible for making sure that information flows smoothly between the working groups as much as possible. But this will also be one of the responsibilities of the individual working group leaders, that they make sure they're in touch with the other working groups, they know what they're doing, so that we integrate all the activities of the action as thoroughly and as carefully as possible. I just want to finish up by pointing out some of the roles that exist, and these are all roles that we need to fill, and this has to be done at the first Management Committee meeting. We can't start the action until these positions have been filled. It's entirely possible that some of them will have several people who are interested in doing them, in which case we will need them to make some kind of presentation to the Management Committee, and we'll have to have a vote to decide who's going to take them on board. I won't read all these out because you can read them for yourselves, but essentially the positions we have to fill are the position of chair of the action, so the person that will coordinate the action overall. I'm very happy as lead proposer to take that position on, but I don't want to stop other people from applying for this post if they think they would like to do it. Then there's a vice chair who supports the chair and has to do some of the formal signing in cases where the chair can't do that. The working group leaders obviously are absolutely crucial because they look after the activities of the individual working groups and they make sure that they happen and they happen on time and they happen within budget. The short-term scientific missions coordinator is responsible for making sure that lab visits are invited and looking at the applications of people to do those and making sure they happen, make sure that they're reported back properly. Science communication manager also is an extremely important task because this is the person who's going to be responsible for developing the website that we have to have, making sure that all our activities are open and transparent and visible on appropriate social media, make sure the groups are talking to each other, but also that all groups are talking to the outside world. This person may be the leader of Working Group 6 on science communication, or it may be somebody else who's a part of Working Group 6. That's something that we can discuss later. There also has to be a grant holder scientific representative. This is automatically the member of the management committee whose institution actually acts as the grant holder, i.e. the institution where the funds from COST will go to then be dispersed to the people who are actually claiming expenses for all the different activities. So I'm going to finish at that point. I hope that's useful. If you've got specific questions, don't hesitate to email me. I'll try to respond to emails as quickly as possible. Please take a very close look at the MOU and then please do follow the link to the Google form and choose the leadership roles you may be interested in and the working groups that you would like to participate in. And I'm very much looking forward to seeing everyone in Brussels on the 17th of April.